Greetings from Hacker Warehouse TV, a great show for InfoSec neighbors. I'm your host, Troy Brown, and in this episode, we're talking to Bastille researcher and inventor of the mouse jack and key sniff, Marc Newlin. We interviewed him the day before his talk at DEF CON 24, and we talked about how Marc got his start and various RF hacking topics. Check it out.
So my name is Marc Newlin, and I work as a security researcher at Bastille Networks. And I'm here because I've done some research into wireless mice and keyboards and found a bunch of keystroke sniffing and injection vulnerabilities. Yeah, so I'm speaking tomorrow at 1 p.m. about mouse jack and key sniffer and some other vulnerabilities which we haven't publicized. So it's in total 16 vulnerabilities affecting devices from 16 vendors. Most of them aren't patched and can't be patched. It's pretty crazy.
Why is it that they can't be patched?
So a lot of the transceivers in these devices use one-time programmable memory. This means that they can write the firmware once at the factory, but after they write the firmware, they can no longer do any updates. And so that means that it's not a matter of, a protocol problem in most cases. It's just they physically can't update these devices.
Explain exactly what it is that the mouse jack and the key sniff do at like a high level.
Yep.
So what are the functions?
Yep.
And then at a low level, what is the machinery? How does it work?
For sure, yeah. So on a high level, there are a bunch of different types of vulnerabilities. Most of them are keystroke injection, and this makes it possible for an attacker to transmit radio packets to a victim's USB dongle and cause keystrokes to type on the victim's computer. So you can use this to execute commands, install malware, that sort of thing. Then there are a bunch of devices that are unencrypted keyboards, and in those cases, the attacker can actually passively sniff keystrokes out of the air from, we've tested out to 250 feet away. Then we have a forced pairing vulnerability with some Logitech devices. Then there's actually this neat Logitech G900 mouse, which is this really expensive gaming mouse. It turns out that you can wirelessly program macros into the mouse, keystroke macros, to execute when a user hits a button on the mouse. So if you have this mouse turned on in your laptop bag, it's constantly beaconing for your USB dongle. The attacker can respond to those beacons and program a macro into this mouse. You then get home, start using your mouse, you click whatever button that's been specified, and it can execute an attack. And then there's some denial of service vulnerabilities, and those allow you to send a packet to the dongle and have it crash until it's unplugged and plugged back in. But then on a more granular level, a lot of these devices use transceivers from this company called Nordic Semiconductor. And Nordic Semiconductor has AES support on these chips, so they can do the AES computation very easily. But a lot of the vendors haven't implemented their AES correctly. So then we have some encrypted keystroke injection vulnerabilities where it's possible to generate your own encrypted keystrokes and send them to the USB dongle without knowledge of the encryption key. And it's really a wide selection of these vulnerabilities that are caused by poor vendor implementations and not using standardized protocols and not using good security measures.
What is the volume or the speed? Like how much data can you transmit by simple keystrokes?
So it depends on the OS. So on Windows, which is the most conservative for rate limiting, you can do one keystroke for 8 milliseconds, and so that's maybe 1,000 words a minute, depending on your word length. And this is at that speed, we can do this from 225 meters away using around $100 in commodity hardware. And so it varies for the keystroke injection or keystroke sniffing vulnerabilities. Those have different transceivers which can't be picked up as far away. But from a considerable distance, you can really execute these attacks. And so in maybe 30 seconds, you can create a new domain administrative user on a Windows machine, or in less time than that, install an APT or some malware. And so it's really a matter of having a short window where you can execute the attack and be gone.
So what does that mean for consumers? What are the ramifications of that?
From a consumer standpoint, it's tough. In the case of Logitech, they are able to update the firmware on their USB dongles, but most people don't know that this exists, or they don't regularly update this firmware. And it's not an automatic update because the updates actually break functionality in some older Logitech devices, and so they don't make it automatic or mandatory. So from a consumer standpoint, they're really at a big risk unless they're using a wireless, or rather a Bluetooth keyboard or a wired keyboard.
So what about for the companies themselves? Do you think that they'll see any kind of backlash over this, or do you think it's still too far under the radar?
I mean, they've definitely seen some backlash with the press, but I think it's going to have a financial hit that's going to make them change. Because right now it's, press is one thing, but if they lose customers, I think that's where the real change is going to happen. One thing that I found, especially with this mouse jack and key sniffer stuff, is that the use of open source intelligence can really speed up the process. So for the mouse jack stuff, I was looking at really 50 devices over the course of maybe a month or two. And in order to do that, I was able to use FCC documentation and transceiver specifications to do a lot of the hard work for me and just basically turn that information into GNU radio stuff that I could then get bits and bytes out of the air. And it's, I'm a big fan of cutting corners where possible to save time, and it's, people need to be more efficient than they are, I think.
So what is the process like to, is it you just look up the regulations, or
Yeah, so when a device is certified by the FCC, you have to have a bunch of information that you submit. And this information describes how the device operates, and it has to meet certain criteria that the FCC specifies. But a lot of the information that they give the FCC also describes how the device operates in such a way that you can implement a software-defined radio decoder and basically turn these documents into your purpose-built SDR decoder for a device.
So what is your number one rule in hacking?
Don't give up. So with the mouse jack stuff, for example, I worked on the project for a few months. I didn't find anything. It was no longer a work obligation at that point or an official work project, but I kept working on it anyway because there had to be something there, and I was relentless, and being relentless allowed me to find all this stuff. It was crazy.
What is your favorite part about coming to DEF CON?
Really, it's the interesting people I meet, because you have a lot of folks who have a lot of very, very amazing skills and expertises that I don't have, and so it's coming and learning from people and meeting people that are interested in the same types of things that I am. I'm excited to see a lot of people interested in radio. I think it's an interesting space, and people use the word IoT, but I really think it's the radio side of things that's the most relevant. And you have all these devices with these embedded transceivers with bad security, no security, and hopefully that these vulnerabilities keep coming out, and people, or vendors rather, will hopefully react to this and start thinking about security in the future.
What would you say was your most valuable takeaway from your DARPA experiences?
What surprised me is that it's really accessible for an individual with no college education to apply time and the internet to learning things. And so in the Spectrum Challenge, for example, I was the only solo team, I was the only guy who hadn't gone to college, but I was still able to do better than most people because I had this strong software background and was able to sacrifice sleep and learn as much as I could.
Yeah, I'm self-taught myself, so I can really appreciate how the internet really has changed how you can just train yourself up in a weekend or a week or whatever you need to do, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is a lot of people think that raw intellect is what you need, but really, in my opinion, you have to have some baseline intellect, but then it's just the ability to put in the time that you need, and a very understanding girlfriend helps.
Okay, so you mentioned that you don't come from an information security background, but you're here nonetheless, a speaker at DEF CON.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice to somebody who's just starting out? Maybe they have some IT experience or something, or maybe not even computers, and they want to get into this. What would be your advice?
Start poking at something and watch it break. This is hugely easier than I would have expected. As soon as I found that first vulnerability, I had this kind of light bulb moment where I realized that this is not hard. Really the work I put in for this, it's not anything that's terribly complex, didn't require any esoteric skills. It's just a matter of me looking at these devices and poking at them until they break.
That's really inspiring to know, actually.
Good. So I'm on Twitter. The handle is my first name and last name, at Marc Newlin. I have a blog which I post maybe once a year or two, which is my name, marcnewlin.me.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, Marc. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Marc Newlin. You can find links to him and his work at Bastille Networks in the description below. If Marc's research inspires you, let us know what you think in the comments. While you're at it, please give us a thumbs up and share this video with your fellow hackers. Once again, this is Troy with Hacker Warehouse TV, and until next time, remember, keep it between the laws.